Well, it's just after dawn here in the heart of southern Queensland on the Monk Ranch. Just over 5,000 acres of absolutely stunning bush country. And to all intents and purposes, the 5,000 acres is one of the few remaining areas in southern Queensland of unspoilt bushland. Because as soon as you get off the property here, you're straight into the gas fields. And I just wish that I could fly all of those councillors and politicians from the UK who wax lyrical about this industry and how amazing it's going to be for the British economy and how it's going to bring work to the local communities. I just wish that I could fly them over here. I wish that I could fly representatives of those communities, those targeted communities, out here to southern Queensland to speak to some of the people that I've spoken to. Some were willing to speak on camera, others not. But all those people have had their lives affected so dramatically in the space of just 7 years, which is when the gas industry basically rolled into this area. You drive out from the Monk Ranch, and the moment you get through the gate, you're in the gas fields. And on a grid that just goes on far beyond you could drive in a day, every 750 meters or so, there's a gas well. The pad is there, it's 1 hectare. This area is completely drilled out now. So the pads are there, this barren patch in the middle of the bush. In between the gas wells are the pipelines. So you have gas wells every 750 meters, and in between those gas wells are the pipelines, and a grid that runs right across this part of the country. This is a very thinly populated part of Australia. The whole of Australia is thinly populated, but here the population density is maybe 1/250th of that of the UK. You have to drive 10 kilometers minimum to find your nearest neighbour. The people here had support, but it just wasn't enough. And as Brian Monk says, it started with 1 gas well. And once this industry got its bits in the ground, there was no stopping them. Literally in the last few years, some 5,000 gas wells have been drilled here in southern Queensland. They're continuing to drill in southern Queensland, just a little bit further away from here. The damage is starting to come home to roost. A few days ago, Brian got the report of a water bore blowing out on a neighbouring property. In other words, what had happened was that the gas had migrated into the aquifer. It had pressurized the aquifer and literally blown the water bore out. And the water was gushing at a height of about 12 feet continuously for a week. Yesterday there was a meeting at that landowner's house. Apparently there were 10 industry personnel at that meeting. Funnily enough, no cameras were permitted. I'm sure it was an intimidating and bullying event. And what it's going to come down to is how much that landowner is going to want to buy his silence. This is something the gas industry are desperate to try and conceal. And then 2 days ago, another report came in of a water bore that had become pressurized through migrating gas and has also blown out. You know, this is a spring-fed nation. It's a nation that relies on its underground aquifers. The Great Artesian Basin is being sucked dry. The water is being sucked out at a rate 6 times greater than it can naturally replenish. And here, this part of the country is actually part of the area where the water seeps through the soil and eventually ends up in the Great Artesian Basin. It's a replenishment area. And now that water has to seep through these contaminated coal seams here that have had literally millions of gallons of frac fluid pumped into them to enable the dewatering process, to enable the gas to flow. The gas then seeks the path of least resistance and ultimately find its way either up through the soil or into the aquifers. Being out here and meeting these people is really quite emotional. Obviously the people I speak to are those that haven't sold out. These are people with a level of moral integrity that is perhaps beyond a lot of people's comprehension. You know, I've asked these people why they don't move, but they can't move. They're locked in here. Everything they had financially and emotionally has been put into these properties. And they know that if they walk away, then the gas industry will effectively just bulldoze into their property and start drilling. The harassment by the gas industry, the harassment by government agencies is very evident. Why do they do it? Because they can. Because they know there's not enough people here to put up any meaningful resistance. You know, the gas industry is now targeting New South Wales. And whilst Bentley was a tremendous success, and Metgasco, one of the minnows in this industry, were effectively run off. The New South Wales government removed their licence on the basis that they clearly hadn't consulted with the community. And yet a few hundred kilometres south in the Hunter Valley, they've had to resort to getting to people to send cardboard hands. If you can't come along yourself, send a cardboard hand. Well, I'm sorry, but the industry and the government don't give a damn about how many cardboard hands are sent. When the political process is bankrupt, all you're left with is boots on the ground. All you're left with is making that choice that Neil talked about. That choice as to whether you follow your heart, or you take the money, or do nothing. So all those people that are sending hands or hearts to Gloucester in the belief that you're doing something meaningful to help stop this industry in its tracks, you're actually being disenfranchised. You're being led to believe that your action of cutting out a paper hand and sending it with your name on to be laid along the roadside at Gloucester is somehow going to stop this industry from waltzing into the Hunter Valley. Well, I'm sorry, but that's delusional. The only thing that stops this is to repeat what happened at Bentley time and time again. You let the politicians know, you let the industry know, you let the investors know that the people of this nation and every other nation where this pernicious industry tries to get its bits in the ground will not be tolerated. Southern Queensland is even more of a wasteland now than perhaps some people thought it was before. This pristine bush has been decimated over an area the size of the UK. Unless you want to see the rest of the eastern seaboard of Australia turned into a similar wasteland, then the people of Australia need to do exactly what Neil said, to come together, to step off the treadmill and get up to Gloucester or wherever else this industry is trying to get established. For the people of Sydney, take a look at what's going on in Camden, a suburb of Sydney. Even people who live in Sydney think there's one gas well there. There's a grid of gas wells. When you actually dig a little bit deeper, you can find the evidence of the reports of clusters of sickness in the suburbs, in the western suburbs, around the gas well. As we come to the end of 2014, we still have a situation in the UK where only one well has been drilled and fracked into unconventional geology. That's the well at Priest Hall, drilled by Quadzilla. I never expected to get through 2013 without another frack, let alone 2014, but it looks like we're going to achieve that. Can we achieve it in 2015? The answer is absolutely we can. Absolutely. But it's going to take people from right across the UK to stop the running on the treadmill for a few minutes and take a look at what's happened out here in Australia. Because this has happened everywhere where this industry has got established, whether that's Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Queensland, New South Wales, and soon, unless the people of the UK come together and prevent this abomination from becoming established, we all, collectively, will be condemning future generations to lives of unimaginable, abject misery. The choice is ours. Every landowner who's approached by the gas industry has an important choice to make. Do they take the money? Or do they follow the example of Brian and David Monk and their families? Or John and Joe Jenkins and their family? And do they say, no amount of money is going to persuade us to permit this industry onto our property? Once investors and once the politicians realise that the landowners and the population of the country are not going to play their disgusting, materialistic game, then maybe the industry will look for more viable alternatives, and maybe the government will recognise that instead of allowing chief executive officers of unconventional gas companies to lobby for the removal of subsidies for renewables, they will do the right thing and act in fiduciary trust and take decisions that are appropriate and beneficial to the people who elected them in the first place. I got a 6-hour drive later today back out to the east coast of Australia. And as is always, I will drive in silence and take the opportunity to reflect on the experience of the last few days, and I will be visualizing my preferred outcome. And when I get back to the UK, I'll be doing whatever I can to help that visualization manifest. Bottom line is, we need all the help we can get. The opposition is certainly very powerful, but collectively we have more power than they could even begin to comprehend. It's time we brought that power to bear. The alternative is unthinkable, unimaginable, and the legacy that we would be leaving future generations would be abominable. Every generation seems to have a very important decision to make at some point. I actually can't think of a more important decision that people need to reflect upon, and that is whether or not to permit an industry which has a proven track record of contamination of the water, of the soil, and of the air. It should be a no-brainer. It should be. We should be doing other things, but it seems, for the time being at least, this has to be our focus. We will defeat this industry. Of that, I'm in no doubt. The only issue is how much damage, how much contamination we permit before we shut it down. I just hope to God that people aren't watching this in some archive in 100 years' time, thinking there were people who knew. There were people who understood what this industry would do to the planet and the misery that it would create for future generations. And they'll be watching this as they fight water wars or worry about where they're going to get the next litre of water to be able to give to their children. If you think that's alarmist, buy a plane ticket and come out to Southern Queensland, or go out to Pennsylvania, or to any of the shale plays in the US, and go talk to those people who haven't taken the money from the gas industry, and you will hear the same story everywhere. It started with just one well.